In honor of World Refugee Awareness Month and in 2023, we're going to talk for a little bit of a very unique partnership. Even though the Global Task Force on Refugee Labor Mobility has 9 members, I think maybe the closest of all the partners, many would say, are Talent Beyond Boundaries and Fragomen. So we have with us today Managing Partner David Crawford from Fragomen in Toronto, and Steph Cousins, the CEO of Talent Beyond Boundaries, to talk a little bit about what the partnership means for them. As far as historians can determine, the partnership began on a very cold winter day in Toronto, January 2019, so over 4 years ago, and it's grown enormously since then. So just to kick it off, I want to ask you first, Steph. Can you tell us how Fragomen and TBB are working together and why?
Yeah, thanks, David. So we're working very closely with Fragomen across every country that we're working in now. And the reason why is I think our missions are very much aligned. So Fragomen, and David, you'll talk about this more and what Fragomen does, but Fragomen being the largest immigration law firm specializing in skilled visas around the world makes Fragomen pretty much the perfect partner for us, because that's a kind of expertise that we need in order to be able to help refugees move on skilled pathways. And it's just been pretty amazing that both we've been able to form this partnership, and for that partnership to really be quite extraordinary in terms of the amount of resources and time and effort that Fragomen has put towards the mission. And I think it comes essentially from, very similar values, and really the team at Fragomen being so passionate about trying to open up skilled migration for everyone, and that includes refugees as well. So we're very lucky.
Anything to add to that, David Crawford?
I think I do agree with all of those things, and it's wonderful to work with the folks in TBB. There is very much a cultural alignment. I'd add also some complementary features that TBB is so wonderfully plugged into a lot of international organizations and governments and NGOs that in our neck of the woods we are not. But our firm is closely involved with law and policy. We do have our own slightly different relationships with governments as we focus on skilled migration. And we do something unusual together, and that is traditionally immigration countries think about humanitarian visas or refugees in one slot and skilled or economic migration in another. And we come together to be able to bridge that gap, and it's a wonderful thing to do.
So, and the other part of your question, David, what are we actually doing together? I think it ranges from providing immigration advice, strategic advice to TBB, supporting some staff secondments, research and analysis of trends. We're both sitting together on the Global Task Force on Refugee Labor Mobility, which we can talk about. So there's advocacy and policy work that goes into that. And yeah, really so much more. It's pretty incredible. Like I say, we are collaborating in pretty much every country that TBB is operating. So
I also want to ask you both about a rather remarkable event in March of this year. Talent Beyond Boundaries and Fragomen co-hosted the first Refugee Labor Mobility Summit, and it certainly did deserve that term, summit, in Jordan in March. David, what were your hopes for this event, and did it deliver?
Good question, David. It was unusual for the reasons I just intimated, that there was a coming together of people on what you might have referred to as the humanitarian or refugee side of the immigration fence. And then there were employers and people like us talking about skilled and economic migration. In my experience, it's the first time that sort of event has taken place. And I was hoping that there would be a shared enthusiasm for what we're proposing to do, what we have been doing. And I was blown away. I thought the level of energy, the level of support, and the commitment by everybody, including sovereign states, to making this world a better place by doing what we're aiming to do was extraordinary. I think the challenge will be maintaining the momentum, a good challenge, one that we should embrace. But that is it. It's a wonderful platform on which I think we can build a great deal.
Steph?
Yeah, so I think for us, it was really about putting labor mobility on the map. And I think, like David said, kind of melding these different worlds that often traditionally haven't talked to each other, but are very much, really skilled migration being a solution with a humanitarian outcome, but not necessarily the same people that are normally working in the humanitarian sphere. So it was about bringing those people together, but also really seeing the outcomes in terms of what practical measures could we achieve through collaboration between these different actors. So we had 8 governments represented. We had most UN agencies there. We had about a dozen businesses. We facilitated job matches, so like direct recruitment of refugees on the ground with the businesses that attended, which was fantastic. And we really saw some great collaboration sparked between the participants, new initiatives and endeavours that we hope will help scale labour mobility programs into the future. So that was the effort, really put labour mobility on the map. And yeah, I think our expectations were pretty much exceeded on that front. It was an amazing event, and yeah, great to see how many organizations and stakeholders are really backing this now.
It was quite a narrative, wasn't it? Going from the big room to the small workshops to reading the interview notes at the job fair and seeing how some of the candidates had actually done. Steph, how do you think the partnership with Fragomen helps TBB scale and achieve its targets in the next 5 years and beyond? How do you see that happening?
I think in a couple of ways. One very key way is in the strategic advice that Fragomen provides our team. So our goal over the next 5 years is to open labour mobility pathways to refugees into 27 countries. That's obviously a really ambitious target, and it involves policy change in 27 different jurisdictions. And fortunately for us, Fragomen is present in all of those jurisdictions and has experts on the ground who are familiar with both the government stakeholders, the legislative frameworks, and just how skilled immigration happens in that country. And already we've seen some great collaboration with, in Europe, for example, together with Fragomen and with the International Organization of Migration. We're working with the European Commission on a program to open labour mobility pathways into Portugal, Belgium, and Ireland. So that program's already ongoing, and we're looking to expand it into new countries as well. And having that practical on the ground expertise, either directly from Fragomen or Fragomen legal counsel partners that are on the ground, is just invaluable, really, for us. So that strategic advice. And then, of course, the scalable immigration advice that can be provided to businesses. So already Fragomen provides immigration services to a very large number of businesses, and many of those businesses come to us often through recommendation of Fragomen to talk about hiring refugees as part of their international recruitment strategies. And yeah, that service in terms of being able to provide immigration advice at scale is really fundamental to our ability to increase numbers of people moving through these pathways. So yeah, they're just two ways. Oh, you're on mute, David.
I had a noisy background here. Where to next, David? What is Fragomen's vision for how this partnership would develop, and what have you committed to?
It's a good question, because we fully endorse the 5-year plan that TBB is running until 2027, but we have to look beyond that. And really, if we're going to make a difference in a world of 100 million displaced people, things have to be scalable. So there are those operational level type things, but also tied with policy and changes to laws. If we don't create pathways, that is legal visa categories for people to be able to use, we'll only have a trickle of people into a small number of countries. The nature of the collaboration, as Steph was mentioning, includes the corporate support we can provide through our knowledge team and our legal advocacy, our marketing guys to help spread the word, and we're looking at the IT capabilities. But I think that at an operational level, coming up with a collaboration that will facilitate a lot of movement to allow businesses to recruit people will be the kernel of what we want to achieve, because nothing happens unless we really make a dent in that 100 million people. And that, I think, is beyond 2027 what we'd be looking for years hence. So, yep, we're committed to playing our part in making that possible. And I'm pleased to say that every time we've engaged collectively in discussions with governments, they see the value. They see the value in for the rights of the refugees themselves, to those host countries that have large numbers of people who are underemployed, and in the labour markets and the business environments in the destination countries that are now crying out for employees, skilled and otherwise. So I think if you take all of those positive points together, the question is just dealing with some road bumps and coming up with a plan that it can scale steadily, incrementally over the coming years.
Steph Cousins, David mentioned working together with governments. Tell us about some of the ways you're working with various governments to help displace talent, and what are the success stories so far?
Yeah, so we've had some really major successes in Australia, Canada, and the UK. And now, as I mentioned, expanding with Fragomen and with International Organisation for Migration into Ireland, Portugal, and Belgium. But really the early successes with Australia and with Canada, Fragomen's been really with us from the very early stages, actually developing the visa applications. So, and seeing what kinds of barriers refugees face through the traditional skilled migration system. And that was certainly invaluable when it came to looking at how to reform these systems. And since we've managed to secure pilots with the Australian government and the Canadian government and the UK government, we've been able to work with Fragomen on how to track impact of those pilots and how do we kind of improve them further. What are the gaps that those pilots currently have that we can improve on and make it easier for refugees and businesses to hire? And I think having, in all jurisdictions, really, Fragomen's kind of included messaging on displaced talent and the issues that refugees face in accessing these visa programs in the policy work that Fragomen's doing, which is great because it's not just Talent Beyond Boundaries saying these things to governments. It's, the biggest skilled migration legal advisor in the world saying it. So that's certainly very helpful at spreading the message about why it's important to business for these barriers that affect refugees to be addressed. It's really onwards and upwards, particularly with the Global Task Force on Refugee Labour Mobility. So Canada is chairing that task force. Australia is on that task force as well. And Australia is chairing the state-led dialogue working group on the task force, which is all about trying to encourage other governments to explore refugee labour mobility programs as well. So both TBB and Fragomen were founding members of the Global Task Force, and I'd say, really helping to drive the agenda. And David Manicom, you're very key to that because you're representing both TBB and Fragomen on the Global Task Force, which means, we're really unified in our message and our contribution to that group. And I see that as a really instrumental vehicle for influencing governments.
Just vis-a-vis governments, David, if you have anything to add, because one thing that strikes me is, Fragomen is a problem-solving organization. Therefore, you react a little differently when somebody says it can't be done in country A or it's going to be really hard in country B. I think that tends to make Fragomen lawyers want to prove them wrong.
Yes. We have government strategies folks in different parts of the world, and they love a question like that. And fortunately, we can draw into our bag of tricks to give examples from various jurisdictions. And one of the features of the event in Oman was where governments got up, and I won't say they were competing with each other to show that they were more committed to it, but there's a level of awareness that this is an important international opportunity, and governments are keen to play a part. And if we can help facilitate positive change in a very constructive, collaborative way, we've got the people with the knowledge who can help make that happen.
David, why are you so passionate about this relationship and about this cause? What's in it for you?
Well, I think of the words of a colleague, a very good colleague, whose friendship I treasure. And he once said to me, you'll go a long way to find difficult people in either organisation, that folks are positive and constructive and ambitious for the future. And so at a very personal level, it's a great environment. The TBB folks in the Oman conference were extraordinary. The amount of work and just the attitude was self-evident. But of course, there's something more significant, more fundamentally significant. We are doing something that I was intimating earlier. We're crossing that bridge between economic migration and refugees to say we can solve some of the problems facing the business community by drawing upon the skills of the refugee world. Completely unheard of. And it may not sound so important to people who are not familiar with this area, but for those who are involved, it's an extraordinary thing and wonderful to be involved in. So I think that the two organizations plan to and are making a difference in the world. And I want to recognize and call out the support and collaboration of the other members of the Global Task Force who are fellow travelers in trying to come with something new for the world. I hope that doesn't sound too grandiose, but for me at least, it's a really worthwhile enterprise.
Grand ambitions are a good thing. Steph, a couple of years ago, I must say, in the depths of COVID and everything else going on, I don't think everyone was certain that TBB was going to grow and flourish and be busily expanding and adding staff and have almost more pilot opportunities out there than we could staff. What do you attribute this growth and success? What's your formula?
I think, can I say luck? No, it's we make our luck. I do think partnerships have been fundamental to the success. So we've always known at TBB that we don't want to be a large, massively growing organization forever. We want to stay small and nimble, and we're really about social change. So we may look sometimes like we operate like a recruitment agency for refugees, but that's not our mandate. Like the mission of the organization is to change skilled visa pathways around the world so that refugees can access them just like anybody else. And that's really a social change mission. And we knew that this would be impossible without partners. And a very fundamental type of partner is within the private sector, both as employers who need to be hiring talent and demonstrating that this is a viable pathway to governments. So yeah, employers are fundamental as recruiters, and I really will give a shout out to Fragomen as an employer, because you've hired people through us, really walking the talk as it is, by hiring candidates and employing them in your offices here in the UK. And yeah, so having partners in the private sector for job matching is key, but also private sector partners who have the capability that a small nonprofit doesn't have, and the capability and the expertise and subject matter expertise that we need access to. So actually finding a partner like Fragomen, and we've got a number of partners who have helped us go from strength to strength. I think Fragomen is a real shining light in that group of partners, because it's not just a small thing. It's not just a donation here or some volunteering there or recruiting here or supporting an event. It's all those things and more. And for a nonprofit to have a full suite of, every type of collaboration you could imagine available to you with a corporate partner is quite rare and very special. And I think it is mutually beneficial. I hope David agrees with that. I think, certainly the Fragomen partners and staff that I've met, I just came here to the UK and I actually had breakfast with the UK Fragomen team this morning. And a couple of nights ago, I was having dinner with the Fragomen team in Dubai. And, they're so passionate about this work. And I think really it is mutually reinforcing this work. But it's really rare to have that level of commitment demonstrated in so many different ways in a partnership.
Could I add a footnote to that comment,
Sure.
Steph?
Sure.
I spoke about our collaboration at our annual partners meeting, where we all got together and we talked about what's going on in the business. And I had a separate session where I spoke about our collaboration. And at the end of it, the partners all applauded. It was just seen as an excellent thing to do, to be working with you guys.
Let's try to go beyond TBB and Fragomen, however important this partnership is. And I see, Fragomen provide a kind of connective tissue role that without which the whole task force would be challenged to fulfill its potential. But let's look at the global scene 5 or 10 years out. We all know that lots of good ideas accelerate, but never get takeoff velocity. What do you think are the forces at play and some of the key partners to add not 1 0, but 2 or 3 zeros to our outcomes? What forces and partners can make that real? Steph, want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've already been talking about some areas where we could deepen collaboration that I think would be really instrumental to kind of dealing with some of the forces at play. One of those forces that we need to harness is, there's so many refugees who've signed up to our program. We've got 65,000 who have registered on the Talent Catalogue, which is the technology platform that we use to facilitate labour mobility for refugees. But there is some human touch work we need to do with them in order to actually get them ready for jobs. And part of that, probably at the entry level, it's doing an intake of each person who signs up to make sure they're eligible, to make sure we understand their background and that they've got their profile completed. Quite, standard stuff. But we can't just rely on technology for that. It particularly when you're working with people who are often in really difficult circumstances. They might have poor internet access. They might be entering their data on their phone. Or they might not have understood the program and signed up when they're not eligible. Maybe they're not in a refugee situation themselves, so they haven't understood and they've signed up, and we need to kind of clarify their eligibility. So things like this, as our numbers increase and, pointing out that TBB doesn't want to grow infinitum, we really want to look at what are the partners we can work with. And this is something we've been chatting to Fragomen about, who could help with some of that intaking work. And some of it also is just improving the technology. We've got this fantastic open source platform called the Talent Catalogue for matching refugees with businesses, but there's always ways we can improve that. And certainly our CTO and our co-founder, John Cameron, have been really looking at ways to expand and enhance the Talent Catalogue so that we are well set up for success into the future. And the really exciting thing, I think, about the Talent Catalogue and going to the forces at play, we need more partners to be able to actually facilitate the matching between refugees and employers. And the beautiful thing about the Talent Catalogue is it's not just for TBB, it's for any partner working in this space. So we now have about a dozen partner organisations who are in the Talent Catalogue, and they're working with candidates who've signed up to the Talent Catalogue. They might be a partner in India or a partner in Indonesia. And what that means is that we can quite rapidly go global. Even though TBB is not on the ground yet in those countries, we can work with those partner organisations using the same technology to be able to expand and scale. But there's going to be more, I think, investment in the technology side to really kind of keep up with the demand as we grow. And that'll be really key to our success in the long run. But yeah, interested in David's thoughts on this one as well, because we've got the plan up to 5 years, but 10 years out, we haven't really got the blueprint yet.
It's such a big question. And there are so many stakeholders in this, David, as you know. As we grow, as this really develops, we have to bear in mind the perspective of the host countries where the refugees are living, the experience of the refugees themselves, on what is quite a complicated series of events, from being interviewed for a job in one country, then getting them to move to another country, settle in, start a job and build their new life. So lots of stakeholders along the way, including the organisations, the partner organisations referenced by Steph. I'd add that I've seen quite a lot of policy development by governments in the recent past, not just in Canada, but elsewhere, which is fundamentally built on pragmatism. We don't have enough workers, skilled or otherwise, in our labour market. How can we give the private sector, employers generally, an opportunity to get the skills that they need? And to me, this is such a fundamental opportunity at a time when there's going to be increasing demand for people. That's going to, by itself, if we get other things right, if we get these legal pathways right, if we get the messaging right, we could make a significant difference. And of course, one of the challenges for TBB and for Fragomen is the advocacy to the private sector to say, you've got an opportunity here and we want to work with you to realise that opportunity. So big picture, that's one of those questions more for a planning day, but a good starting point, David.
Yeah, and as I want to ask you next, David, about the role of the private sector, but perhaps as a segue into that, looking at some of the big socioeconomic forces at play. Some estimates show that there are green economy projects worth $1 trillion in North America and Europe that are delayed or being downsized due to insufficient labor resources. Mm-hmm. So thinking about those sorts of forces and other big ones like demographics, I wonder, David, if you could tell us about the role you see for the private sector, small, medium, and large employers, and industry associations, but then specifically, what can Fragomen do to help make them effective partners?
It's a wonderful question because we've been talking to large employers, very large, multi-jurisdictional, multinational employers, SMEs, small employers, and industry associations. They all expressed interest. There's a certain logic to complementary pathways, these labour complementary pathways, that is undeniable. The way that larger businesses will deal with it typically is that it's a more bureaucratic and difficult process for them to come to terms with how that might fit within their talent acquisition terms. But having said that, we've got some very significant employers who are already involved, and I see there's a great opportunity for them to increase their involvement, not just in one country, but across a number of countries. Interestingly, I've found that smaller employers who are just desperate, this is where the pragmatism comes in. And I've seen in a few instances a quick uptake because they've got an urgent project and there is no viable alternative. What I would hope, though, is in time, this becomes a more widely recognised alternative. It might fit within other recruitment or sourcing options, but nonetheless, and this is the really important part for me, just to be seen as something normal, just as another way to identify the right person for the right job. If anything, that is what I would hope to be our goal after it all is said and done, that this is just one of those things and it's not so big a deal as it is now. If it gets to that point, I think we'd all be very happy.
That would be a great note to end on, but I do have one last question. We might call it the capstone one in a sentence or two each. So, Steph Cousins, CEO of Talent Beyond Boundaries, why you? What is it in your DNA that brought you here? And don't be modest. What makes you so effective at what you do? Why are you so good?
Oh, that's a very hard question to ask me. I think I am very passionate about this issue, and I've worked on, well, I came from a background in humanitarian policy work and in human rights and refugee advocacy in the Australian context. So I think I've seen what happens when people don't have protection and support, and also what happens when an issue like this is politicized in very unhelpful ways, and just how much harm that can cause to people. And I've also seen through the course of that work just how refugees come from all walks of life, like anyone else, and have a range of different skills and aspirations, and if anything, disproportionately more likely to be amazing because they've gone through so much and come out the other side, and there's a big resilience boost that you get out of that experience. So to me, I'm just very passionate that this is genuinely something that can make the world better. And I think when you see the stats about the number of displaced people around the world, just today, UNHCR's put out new figures. There's now over 35 million refugees in the world, plus over 5 million asylum seekers, plus another 10 million stateless people. And the world tends to look at people in this situation as, you know, a problem or an issue to be resolved, but it's actually an opportunity. And I think that, you know, what you pointed out before, David, about demographic factors around the world, aging populations, the need to transition to zero carbon economies, the major economic transition that we're going through at the moment. We need workers, and this is an opportunity. And obviously it's, you know, we want people to be able to go home if they want to, if it's safe to do so, but we also know that conflicts go for a very long time. So to me, this is such an opportunity to be part of doing something good for the world. And that is why I'm doing it. And the chance to work with really wonderful people who also have that same passion and drive, including you both, but the whole team at Talent Beyond Boundaries and the other partners that we work with, like Refuge Point, amazing team, you know, the team at UNHCR, team at IOM. Like, we're so lucky to be working with such a passionate group of people that have the opportunity to do something positive in the world. So that is why.
Yeah, David Crawford, I suspect that being managing partner of Fragomen in Toronto is probably enough to keep you busy. So
Yeah.
why you for this?
I consider myself lucky, David. I was in the right spot at the right time. I did have earlier in my career refugee-related experience in Pakistan and South Africa and Southern Africa. But there's a certain logic to this whole concept, which to me was undeniable, and so obviously the right thing to do, that it was a bit of a no-brainer. And as I was saying earlier, the fact that we get to collaborate with such competent and enthusiastic and positive people, particularly within Talent Beyond Boundaries, but also the other partners that Steph mentioned, like the IOM, UNHCR, and so on, means that it's actually a very positive experience personally, and also I can say on behalf of my firm, a wonderful thing for us. Culturally, by the way, in our organisation and TBB, being involved is a positive thing. It actually, our organisations want to be involved with an employer that does something to make a difference in the world. That opportunity awaits for employers who recruit people through these labour pathways. That opportunity to build the support of your own staff who think my employer is doing the right thing. This is a good place to be.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for your time today, but also, of course, for your huge contribution to this project over the last years. So glad that you brought your big skills and your big hearts to the job of finding more safe homes for refugees using their skills and talents. Thanks very much.
And thanks to you, David. And thanks, Steph.
Thanks, David and David.